He was proven by getting out was that he was a loser. That's when he flared up and started walking towards me, raising his voice. He said, "That's one thing I'll tell you, Goss, is I'm not a loser." He said, "Someday you'll hear from me. You'll see me again or you'll read about me. But someday you will hear about me and you'll know that I'm not a loser."
Dahmer came back to live with his father in Bath, Ohio, but the drinking never stopped. On October 7th, 1981, he was picked up outside a Ramada Inn for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. He was fined $60. His son had become more than Lionel Dahmer could handle, so he sent him to the one person he thought could help. Back in the city where Jeffrey was born, Milwaukee. Dahmer moved in with his grandmother in the suburb of West Dallas. Catherine Dahmer is, by all accounts, one of the only people Jeffrey Dahmer ever loved.
It was at this time he decided to try to put behind him the nightmare he'd relived regarding his first homicide. He constantly fought urges to kill by attending church with his grandmother, by reading the Bible, and by trying to live his life in an orderly fashion. To walk the straight and narrow are the words he used.
He stopped drinking. He tried to suppress any homosexual thoughts. He tried to suppress any sexual thoughts at all.
For 2 years, Dahmer did manage to stop drinking, and he found work, first as a phlebotomist, drawing blood at a company called Milwaukee Blood Plasma. But once again, his work was poor, and once again, he was released.
I didn't like sticking people with needles.
So he tried working as a mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Company on the graveyard shift. One worker described Dahmer this way: he was a real quiet guy. He was the type of guy that went on a break. He would drink his coffee, eat a donut, stare at the wall.
Was there a trigger that pushed Jeffrey Dahmer back down that road he tried to go away from?
He describes an incident where he was sitting in a library reading, and a man passed him a note, which Mr. Dahmer interpreted to be a proposal to become involved with this fella in homosexual activity. Mr. Dahmer reports he turned that down at the time, but that began to get him thinking about getting back into homosexual activity, and clearly with the homosexual activity to move more down the line of becoming involved in the killings.
But still, he tried to avoid killing again. He thought maybe he could act out his fantasies some other way.
There are really three things that happened during that period. One is he stole a mannequin from a department store and attempted to pretend in his mind that this mannequin was a dead body. He actually would relate to it in a sexual way. He had that at his grandmother's home. She discovered it. He had to make up a story and then disposed of it. The second thing is that he went to a funeral parlor and observed the body of a young boy, about 18 years old, who had passed away. He then went out to the cemetery in the hope of digging up the body. The ground was cold. He was not able to do that. The third thing that he did is that he would go to numbers of bathhouses and slip some medication into the drinks of people that would knock them out and have them in this sleep-like state where he could again relate to them intimately in his mind as though they were dead.
That would have continued indefinitely except for one event, which was the man who didn't regain consciousness when he should have. The paramedics were called. They knew Dahmer drugged the guy, and they kicked him out of the bathhouse.
On September 15th, 1987, 9 years after he killed Stephen Hicks, Dahmer picked up another young man, 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi, at a local gay disco. They took a room at the Ambassador Hotel.
He stated that he was drinking heavily with this male, and Dahmer passed out. When he woke later, he found the male dead in his bed. Dahmer stated that it looked like he beat the male on the chest with his fist. Dahmer stated that he believed that he had blacked out and killed the party.
He begins to believe that now he's killed again. Is there any God? Maybe there's just an evil force, a devil in this world. And really at that point stops fighting, begins to believe it's his destiny to do this. He now begins to feel that it is meant to be that he's going to kill.
It's hard for me to believe that a human being could have done what I've done. I want you to understand that my questions regarding Satan and the devil were not to diffuse guilt from me and blame the devil for what I've done, because I realize what I've done is my guilt. But I have to question whether or not there is an evil force in the world and whether or not I have been influenced by it.
Buried in Dahmer's questions about evil was a kind of surrender, a feeling that his urge to kill was irresistible. Soon he would be completely controlled by his obsessions, carried into a world where killing was a part of everyday life. When we return, the final chapter of Jeffrey Dahmer. In July 1990, Dahmer moved to the Oxford Apartments, a cheaply made building in the middle of a decaying urban ghetto.
Dahmer requested another cup of coffee and a cigarette, at which time I complied, and he stated, "Is there anything else you wish to ask me regarding these offenses?" At this time, I began to question Dahmer regarding the way in which he would decide which individuals to approach.
It was typically a Friday, preferably on a long weekend. Before he went out cruising for a victim, he would take the medication and grind it and place that in a glass, carefully placing the glass that had drug in it in one location and the one that he would use in another location. And he'd go to his favorite haunts, which were these gay bars.
Dahmer states that once in a bar, he would generally drink by himself and observe the different individuals in the gay establishment. He states that it did not matter the color, race, or ethnic heritage of his victims, as long as they met the general physical profile.
He'd look for who had the shoulders he liked, the physique he liked. Some nights, no one was appealing to him, and he'd go home alone. Dahmer would wait till late in the evening to make an approach toward a man, and he'd always pick someone who was alone, often after everyone else had left, always with the same lines. "How would you like to make some money? I'd like to take some pictures of you. I'll give you $20 if you'll come with me and let me take some pictures." He'd take them into his apartment, and when inside, he would give them the glass that had been prepared with the drug. He'd add liquor to it. And once the man was asleep, he now knew that he had hours available to him. And typically during that time, he would lie next to the man. He would remove most of his clothing. Sometimes he would photograph the man in various positions and in various states of dress and undress. He would masturbate while fondling him. But there's one thing he always did before strangling them, and that was drink some more, because he hated that part. The idea of killing them was abhorrent to him.
Mr. Dahmer did not feel as though these people were dead because he was still relating to them. He would talk to them, he would cuddle them, he would hold them, he would think about them. He took the skull of somebody he had killed and kept it in a locker so he could be close and have companionship with it. Now that's very, very sick, but to him it felt as though there was something warm and comforting happening, not that he was doing something terrible and awful.
They were crimes of love in the most perverse way imaginable. And every time he disposed of a victim, he thought what a waste this was to take the life, to ruin what he had thought was a beautiful human. So he had the idea that if he were to preserve a part of the person, the skull, photographs, skeleton, then it wouldn't be such a waste. He drew for me a picture of what he meant to develop. It was of a very simple table on which he had skulls lined up facing forward. there would be a full skeleton suspended on